Hello there everybody. I'm going to, before the regular video, make a little correction. Last video, which was my top 25 of 1984, the songs from that year in a chart. I promised that the next video would be part 2 of that video, the places from 15 and up to number 1. Now I made a pretty shameful goof of erasing the part 2 video that I was supposed to edit, erasing that from my computer and from the smartphone, so I have to film it again. So I will do a part 2 of my chart from 1984, but it will be coming up a little bit later on due to a little bit stupidity, some errors that I made of erasing part 2 from my computer. So with that said, let's now move on to another video that I hope is very interesting. A little bit longer, I hope that you can bear with that, but here we go. Hello there everybody. The 30th of April, there were not only here in Sweden Walpurgis evening, but it was also something called International Jazz Day. Now we here in Sweden have tons of special days for various occasions, one stupider than the other, but I thought that this one was pretty interesting. There were digital concerts broadcasting from all over the world for those who wanted to see that. It was also here in Sweden. They were broadcasting live concerts from various jazz clubs from around the country. Empty jazz clubs, of course. But I didn't watch more than little sneak peeks because I thought it was a little too modern jazz for me. But I thought it would be a pretty good opportunity to actually celebrate International Jazz Day here at the vinyl community by doing a response to a thread that's been going on here for quite a while now, A to Z. I don't know where it originated from, but I've done it once before. I think it was around 3-4 years ago, where I did an A to C Z only with the new wave synth bands, and I'm going to also soon do a regular with normal pop artists and normal A to Z, but I thought this time I would do something real special twist on it. I'm going to do an A to Z only with jazz artists. So it was extremely hard with some letters, so I have to cheat a bit. One letter I have to expel. I mean, how many jazz artists playing classic jazz do you know on the letter X? That was pretty mission impossible. And in some cases I have to take an artist I don't have a whole album with, but he is actually playing on an album. And in one case I had to, normally you have to have on the last names, but in one case I have to go by the first name. So I know, I dug a hole and I have to I dug a hole for myself and I now have to live with it. But it was fun to do anyway, fun to do a special one. So here we go, A to Z with jazz artists, jazz albums, jazz musicians. Starting with, of course, A, multiple suggestions here, Armstrong you can have. I picked Gene Ammons, saxophone player, that I first bought an album with, and I was so interested in it. But I gave him another chance, and I think it was this one I got first. That okay, I give this one a chance, and it was actually a whole lot better, a really great one. And since then I have bought a great deal of Gene Ammons albums, a real great bebop saxophone player. Playing tenor. So this Jug Sessions MRK Jazz Series double album set. A, Gene Ammons. B, there we have also a whole lot of suggestions. So I'm going to do have two artists sharing the same letter. I could have made an honorable mention, Bunny Berrigan, one of my favorite big band leaders, sadly forgotten. But B, of course, is for Count Basie. And Count Basie, that shameless to say, I was when I was in my teens, I was so interested in Count Basie. I thought his piano playing was not all that good. I still think it is. He's not the best piano player, and he has admitted that himself, that he is no real piano player. But he's also instead he is one of the absolute best arranger and big band leaders, composers, and it's a really great and fantastic band. One of my favorites, even though his piano playing wouldn't last that much in a trio session. Even trust me, I know I have a trio album. But I picked Count Basie in Sweden. This concert is on many kind of formats and releases. This is a release from Roulette, and it is recorded in 1962 in Stockholm. So this is Gröna Lund, Swedish amusement park. But B also for me, he has to share it with Clifford Brown, a trumpet player that I also like very much. I picked this one with Max Roach, Dahoud. Clifford Brown died way too early, and from what I heard, he was one of a kind in many forms, one of a kind when it comes to playing, but he was also one of the few straight edge guys in jazz. He didn't drink alcohol, he didn't have any drug problems, from what I heard, overall nice guy. So Clifford Brown, also B. C is another trumpet player. I said before that I wasn't that much of a Basie fan in my teens, but it got way better as I grew up. But very early there was one musician in the Basie band that I liked more than the others, and that was I don't know why. I think it was the only reason was that every recording I heard with him he was such an amazing swing that I liked so much, and that was Buck Clayton, fantastic, great trumpet player. This is an album with Buddy Tate, released on Prestige, called Kansas City Nights. Really great one. Double album set. So C for me is Buck Clayton. D, I haven't picked that much Swedish musicians. I don't know, maybe it was more natural to pick the American ones, I don't know. But I picked Arne Domnerus. a Swedish saxophone player, also plays clarinet occasionally. And Arne Domnerus, if you listen to most of the Swedish jazz recordings from around 40s all the way almost until his death, you will see the name Arne Domnerus almost everywhere because he played on many recordings. I picked this one, Arne Domnerus Nalen Orchestra, 1951 to 55. Nalen was and still is a very famous jazz club, but at the time in the 50s it was a real classic where all the real jazz place where all the big Swedish names played and people came to dance. It was seen at the time as a place for sin for many of the parents, too many youngsters. But a lot of those who played at Nalen were considered real big ones. It was Nalen was shut down for a while, 60s, 70s, and was restored and built up again. I think it was around 20 years ago. And today it's for not only jazz but many kinds of music forms. But it's a legendary place. Unfortunately, I haven't been to it yet. I hope to go there one day when it is jazz, of course. E. I think you're pretty much sure of what I will show right now. Of course, E stands for Duke Ellington, a musician that I, as you well know, I had a pretty strange interest for. I really didn't listen to Duke Ellington from 89 until around 5 years ago. And then after that I've started to enjoy Duke Ellington very much, at least as long as I don't have to hear his ordinary worn out overplayed hits. But this is a great double album set, live album from Chicago Civic Opera House in 1946, where he plays together with Django Reinhardt. Real great album, consisting some that I really like with Duke Ellington, and that is his suites. This is Deep South Suite is on this one, and the beautiful Indian Suite. So this one highly recommended. F stands for another trumpet player that I like pretty much, and it's Art Farmer. Art Farmer, who plays mostly bop, but knows everything. Here he plays with his Art Farmer quartet with Jim Hall, playing Visa på annorlunda vis. Songs in different ways. And yes, here he plays, this is recorded in Stockholm, and he plays Swedish folk songs in jazz ways, in jazz versions. So you have a lot of those classic jazz songs here. Visa vid midsommartid, and Det såldes sina hemman, those classic Swedish folk songs from the past that he has transformed into great jazz versions. F, Art Farmer. G, there I could have picked Swedish again, Lars Gullin, great saxophone player. But I picked another saxophone giant, also with a huge Stockholm connection, Stan Getz. Really magnificent player, so smooth, so relaxing, so calm. Also a musician that can play almost anything from real swing to bop to cool to Brazilian. This is an album called Stockholm Sessions 1958, It is recorded in Stockholm with Swedish musicians because Stan Getz lived in Sweden for a number of years. He has a Swedish son living here who also is a jazz musician. He had a Swedish wife. Stan Getz, G, that's natural. H also feels pretty natural. Another one of my favorites, maybe one of my earliest favorites that I liked from the first time I heard him. Real great one. One of the best saxophone players when it comes to older jazz. Talking about Coleman Hawkins with his little raspy saxophone, real classic. I heard a lot of Coleman Hawkins when I was younger, so this one has always been a classic to me. I picked Caton. This is one of my favorites, as this is recordings from 78 released on Keynote, a label that was existing during the World War II, and that I think is one of the most sadly forgotten labels, who had their own style. They sounded so relaxed, swing, that had their special sound. It sounded almost like they were playing in someone's living room. That kind of that kind of a sound it was, and it was. I really like those keynotes, though they are so hard to get a hold of recordings with keynotes. But I managed to find this one with Coleman Hawkins in with different musicians, and it was one of the best findings a couple of years ago. Those of you who might remember it. I have to cheat. I have hard time finding a jazz musicians in my collection with the last name is starting with an I. So I have to go with the first name here. So I picked JorgenS. That here comes with I, not J. And JorgenS is most famous for recordings from the early big band era. Talking about late 20s, early 30s, that I've been starting to like really much now. And really cozy jazz, cozy early big band jazz. Now J, could I pick Quincy Jones, but for some reason I felt like I wanted to be a little, I wanted you guys to be a little more surprised, so I picked Thad Jones. And Thad Jones, modern big band, we have here very early big band in its earliest form. Here we have modern big band. This album Eclipse is recorded in 1979, but he has one really great horn section, real blow in this orchestra. Really like Thad Jones band. Especially when he also is connected with Mel Lewis. But this is Thad Jones on his own. K, also a lot of great musicians I could have picked, Andy Kirk and Klaus Joy, but I picked a musician that, like Ellington, I had a pretty various relationship to. I've disliked him for so many years until just a couple of years ago that I started to realize, hey, this one is so great. Why have I denied this for all these years? And I'm talking about Stan Kenton. A big band leader that managed to play the classics and also his own compositions, but classics. But he also did modern arrangements. His arrangements, in most cases, are so magnificent and real step away from the traditional big band jazz. As he dared to experiment and do different stuff with his horn sections. So really magnificent big band leader. It only took me around 40 years to discover that. L, from a more modern big band leader, we go to a more traditional one. And L for me stands for Jimmy Lunsford. Now, I don't buy that much of these classic big band leaders right now nowadays. Not that I don't like them. I still love classic big band very, very much. But it's hard to know what I have and don't have. A lot of these songs tend to actually be on the same album over and over. So it's hard to know what I have and don't have. But this is an album that I felt like I gotta have it, even though I have a lot of Jimmy Lunsford albums. Hard to know what songs I have and don't have. Maybe I should have a database over jazz songs that I have. I have to start today and finish when I get 65. But this is a box set with recordings from 39 and 40. 4 record box set. Real great one. The complete Jimmy Lunsford. Fantastic box set. A must for every Jimmy Lunsford fan. M. Also I could have a lot of choices here. Jerry Mulligan I could have picked. But I picked a musician that is not seen all that much. And it's a little forgotten today, but that I heard in Swedish radio when I was younger, and I realized that this is actually great bebop jazz, a great bebop musician. Howard McGee, trumpet player, and real great one, who was more of a side player for the big ones, but he also had his own bands. However, those were not just as recognizable as the big ones like Parker and Gillespie and so on. He had his, like all the other musicians at that time almost, with exception from Clifford Brown maybe, problem with alcohol and drugs, but he got out of it, and I think it was around 85 when he died in the 80s. So real great trumpet player. N is another trumpet player, a lot of trumpet players here. Another trumpet player from the bebop genre that died very young, but that I heard early on and that I liked from the start. Very great one. Fats Navarro. And Navarro is a traditional bebop musician, smooth, great, often together with Ted Dameron. He's almost like sidekick. And this is a live recording from Royal Rose, Volume 1, and I also have Volume 2. And a lot of these of Fats Navarro recordings are live, and they are really great. And died way too young in the 50s of illness. Oh, that one was tough. That one was really tough. But I felt like we have covered many eras of jazz from the 70s, and I think we should go way back to the earliest form of big band, where it actually started from. I'm not that much fan of Dixieland, but I have this album with this iconic, once again, trumpet player. It's not that I am a huge fan of trumpets, but it just happened to be that way. This is King Oliver. This is an album that is King Oliver on one side and Fletcher Henderson on the other side. But King Oliver, that didn't live that easy life. I think he was mentally instituted at some points. And but he was one of the first real big names in jazz. Uh, One of the earliest huge idols for many trumpet players. Among others, Louis Armstrong had King Oliver as one of his idols. P, I think I'm a little bit predictable here. I think many can see what's coming now. P, of course, Oscar Peterson. One of the best piano players ever. Can play everything from swing to modern stuff to bebop, cool jazz, which I think is most famous for. But really fantastic one. Also one of the few jazz musicians during this bebop cool era that didn't have any drug problems. This is a box set called Star Portrait, released by Verve. And this is his classic trio with Ray Brown and Ed Thigpen in a nutshell. You might see it as the greatest hits of that combination. Who also did the fantastic Night Train albums with this trio. But and there are some songs from those albums on this box set also. Oscar Peterson, of course. Q, that one was tough. I almost gave up on that one. And then I felt like maybe I can bend the rules and have the first name start with a Q, as in Quincy Jones. But then I googled and managed to find a musician that actually has his last name start with a Q that I felt like I gotta have something with this one. It's not an album of its own, it's a part of the orchestra. But so it's a little rule bending there, but at least I managed to stick with the last name, starting with the last name. So I picked that one. This is a saxophone player named Paul Quinchette. Starts with a Q right there. And he's most famous for replacing Lester Young in the Count Basie band, although he never got close to getting the same recognition as Lester Young. He played with the Red Nichols, and he played here with Jay McShann's orchestra, and a name that I actually knew when I heard it, and I felt like maybe I have something where he plays on at least, so I could have a Q. R, we have another one of my favorites that aren't too recognized today, unfortunately. It was very tough to find records with this big band leader at one time, but now I managed to find actually a pretty okay collection with Boyd Rayburn. Also one of these modern big band leaders, but unlike Stan Kenton, I liked Boyd Rayburn from early on, as I heard some of his songs in Swedish radio, and I thought that this was really great. This is a collection, the 2 CD collection, a Boyd Rayburn collection. And Boyd Rayburn was very much ahead of his time. He mixed modern classical music like Stravinsky with jazz. You can hear many times where he plays traditional big band for the 40s, and then all of a sudden marches into pretty modern little jazzy Stravinsky music, all of a sudden modern classical style music. He was very ahead of his time, didn't get the recognition that he deserved at the time, but you might say that he got great reviews, but few of the jazz fans and the record buyers actually bought his records. S, I think there many of you understands what's coming now. Jimmy Smith, of course. I have a little bit bad luck finding Jimmy Smith albums lately. It was uh, for many years it was almost a tradition that I find at least one Jimmy Smith album a year. Now it was quite a while since I bought one. It's not easy to find one these days for a reasonable price. But still, I'm a huge Jimmy Smith fan, even though it was a while since I showed him. S, of course, Jimmy Smith. This is Back in the Chicken Shack that I won in a contest for B-sides, Jenny, a while back. T, also, those who have followed my channel should know what's coming now. T for me is Lenny Tristano. A musician also that this might be my first real favorite when it came to jazz. Also one of my first encounters with older jazz that made me fall in love with older jazz when I heard a tribute program to him in Swedish radio about him, sorry, not with him, about him. He also was very much ahead of his time with playing cool jazz, bebop jazz, modern jazz with block chords and doing his own unique, odd arrangement on classical songs and often renaming them because you can hardly hear the original melody when he rearranged that classic song. Night in Tunisia is one example. This is the new Tristano I bought at Solna Record Fair. So Lenny Tristano always been a favorite of mine. That one was real tough. I almost gave up on that one. But I managed to find a record that I bought about a year ago. Bebop jazz with a band called United Nations with Toshiko and her International Jazz Sextet. And Toshiko, the Japanese jazz pianists, put together a band here consisting musicians from all over the world. Bert Wallander from Sweden, we have Nat Adderley, USA, John Drew, England, Renee Thomas, England, Bobby Jasper, Germany, Rolf Kuhn, Germany. So that's why the band is called United Nations. V, of course, Sarah Vaughan, a musician, a singer that I, much like Sam Kenton, had problem with listening to for many years until I, about 10 years ago, realized that she has a really great voice. And it was when I took a chance on this live album and realized that this was so great. And since then I converted into a huge Sarah Vaughan fan. It's interesting how age can transform you. Sarah Vaughan, a fantastic, unique voice that can sing almost anything. This is live in Japan. Only Sarah Vaughan and a piano trio led by Carl Schroeder. W stands for, of course, Teddy Wilson. Also a classic that have been with me since I started listening to jazz. I picked, of all Teddy Wilson albums I have, I picked this box set, CD box set called Hall of Fame, released on Past Perfect Silverline. This is a 5 CD box set containing a whole lot of, it's not only of his early recordings, and many of them, I think it's around 3 of these albums are with his then big band with Bill Holiday on vocal. So this is a highly recommended box set if you can find it. I think it isn't that easy outside Europe, but. And why would I pick this one as the letter Y because he is such a great saxophone player. And Y for me is, of course, Lester Young. Real fantastic musician that also have been with me since I started listening to jazz almost. This is Lester Leaps Again, a real great live double box set from various broadcasts. I bought in record fair in Umeå a couple of years ago. So Lester Young, real smooth, the real fantastic musician, swing musician that have been a role model for many saxophone players. And Z, of course, for me, of course it isn't. I could have picked others also, but for me it is, of course, Monica Zetterlund, Swedish vocalist. That is a huge favorite of mine. This is one of these CD box sets that put together different kind of albums and releases them in these kind of normally I don't like these. It's a little like jazz albums for beginners, but I had to have this one because it's Monica Zetterlund and it's some of the most classic albums that I didn't have. And Monica Zetterlund albums today, when she is no longer among us, are pretty expensive. These ones, at least. But of these one, I pick this Waltz for Debbie. The Monica Zetterlund together with Bill Evans. Monica Zetterlund was coming over to USA to sing, and she did some recordings. Not this one because this is recorded in '64 in Stockholm when she had given up her international career. She gave it up mostly, according to herself, because she was scared of how black musicians were treated. She didn't want to go into that business over there. She preferred to sing in Sweden instead, where she not only sang jazz, she also sang comical. She did comical stuff with the comedians Hasse och Tage. She sang Swedish Schlager. She also did movies. She was an all-round musician, an all-round artist that could do everything, and she did it so great. And her fantastic voice that is so unique. So, A to Z with jazz. A little longer video, I hope you can forgive me. But it was fun to do this one, to celebrate International Jazz Day like this, my own way. But soon enough I will do a regular A to Z also. I think I have only done one with new wave synth pop, so it would be fun to do one regular also. There are so many threads out there that I don't know where to begin. So until next time, I hope that each and every one of you have a real nice time, no matter where you are, no matter what you do. Take care and so long. Hello there, everybody. I'm going to, before the regular video, make a little correction. Last video, which was my top 25 of 1984, the songs from that year in a chart. I promised that the next video would be part 2 of that video, the places from 15 and up to number 1. Now I made a pretty shameful goof of erasing the part 2 video that I was supposed to edit, erasing that from my computer and from the smartphone, so I have to film it again. So I will do a part 2 of my chart from 1984, but it will be coming up a little bit later on due to a little bit stupidity, some errors that I made of erasing part 2 from my computer. So with that said, let's now move on to another video that I hope is very interesting. A little bit longer, I hope that you can bear with that, but here we go.